Apply. On a day of spectacle in Beijing, the world watched as the People's Republic of China put its military might on full display. Across Tiananmen Square, apply. Lines of precision marching troops moved in lockstep, armored vehicles rumbled past, and futuristic weapons gleamed beneath the bright lights of television cameras. Apply. The occasion was solemn yet defiant, the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, a reminder of China's sacrifice and resilience. Apply, but also a declaration of its ambitions for the century ahead. More than 24 foreign leaders, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, apply, looked on as Chinese President Xi Jinping cast himself not just as steward of a proud history, but as commander of a force meant to rival the United States. Thousands of miles away, apply, inside the White House in Washington, Donald Trump was paying attention. He admitted as much, saying, "They were hoping I was watching, and I was watching." His words, apply, short and uncharacteristically restrained, gave little away. But the symbolism was hard to miss. China's parade with its sleek missiles and disciplined spectacle, apply, was not just about honoring fallen heroes. It was a message to Trump, to America, to the world, that a new center of power has arrived, apply, ready to challenge the global order Washington built after World War II. At first, Trump appeared nonchalant. In a podcast interview, apply, he insisted he was not concerned by Beijing's display of strength, even as Xi stood shoulder to shoulder with Putin and Kim Jong-un. But later that same night, his tone shifted. Apply. On his Truth Social account, Trump accused China of erasing America's role in history, writing that Beijing should give the United States more credit for its part in the Allied victory. Apply. His frustration was tinged with sarcasm as he offered warm regards to Putin and Kim, accusing them of conspiring against America. For Trump, parades are more than just ceremonies. Apply. They are symbols of power, pageantry, and national pride. He has staged his own spectacles, from a red carpet welcome for Putin in Alaska, complete with a stealth bomber flyover. Apply to a Washington parade marking the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. But those events, heavy with nostalgia and historic imagery, apply, stood in stark contrast to China's futuristic arsenal. Where Trump evoked a past era of American greatness, Beijing was signaling its claim to the future. Apply. This contrast cuts to the heart of Trump's broader vision, his belief in tariffs and mercantilist economics as tools to restore American dominance. Apply. His America First trade policies have disrupted alliances and reshaped relationships across the globe, yet they have also pushed other nations into each other's arms. This week, apply, as Trump complained about China's parade, another picture was emerging: Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and India's Narendra Modi huddled together at an economic summit in Tianjin. Apply. Once strained ties between Beijing and New Delhi are warming, in no small part because Trump's tariffs have targeted both countries. Apply, leaving them to seek new partnerships outside Washington's orbit. Trump insists these tariffs protect U.S. industry and generate revenue. But the price is mounting. Apply. Allies from Tokyo to Manila now weigh the stability of America's word against the reality of China's growing influence. Apply. And while Trump focuses on America's immediate neighborhood, Greenland, Panama, Canada, he risks losing ground in Asia, where the balance of power is shifting. Apply. There is another danger. A federal appeals court has ruled that many of Trump's tariffs rested on a faulty interpretation of U.S. law. Trump vows to fight on. Apply. To take his case to the Supreme Court. But even conservative justices have been wary of presidents stretching their authority too far. Apply. The very foundation of his economic strategy may be at risk of collapsing in a courtroom. So tonight, from Beijing's sweeping military parade to Washington's Oval Office, apply. From new alliances in Asia to the halls of American justice, we are left with a question: is Donald Trump's high-risk trade policy forging a second American golden age? Apply. Or is it accelerating the dawn of a new order led by China? The dangers are clear, the rewards remain uncertain, and the world is watching. Apply. China's military parade in Beijing was far more than a commemoration of the end of the Second World War. It was a deliberate display of strength, discipline, and ambition. For hours, apply, the world watched as the Chinese People's Liberation Army showcased its latest weaponry: sleek intercontinental ballistic missiles, advanced drones, hypersonic systems, apply, and a sea of precision marching soldiers. This was not just a reflection of history, but a projection of the future. Apply, a carefully orchestrated message that China has the capacity and the will to rival the United States as a global military power. The optics were powerful. Standing atop Tiananmen Square, apply. Xi Jinping placed himself at the center of that message. He was flanked by leaders who for decades have stood in opposition to Washington's dominance: Vladimir Putin of Russia, apply; Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and more than 24 heads of state representing nations that have often challenged or distanced themselves from the American-led order. Apply. The symbolism could not have been stronger. It was as if Beijing had gathered its allies and critics of the United States in one place to declare the balance of power is shifting. Apply. And China is prepared to lead the change. Military parades are rarely just about tanks and missiles. They are about national pride, historical narrative, and international positioning. Apply. In this case, Beijing's parade carried layers of meaning. On one hand, it was a reminder of China's suffering and resilience during World War II. Apply. A war in which Chinese nationalists and American forces were instrumental in defeating Japanese imperialism. Yet by centering the Communist Party as the main hero of that victory, Apply. Tsai was rewriting history in a way that strengthens his party's claim to legitimacy at home while projecting an image of continuity and strength abroad. On the other hand, Apply. The overwhelming focus on new weaponry underscored how far China has come from being a nation once fractured and invaded. Apply to one now standing as a technological and military power with ambitions of global reach. For Washington, the parade poses a dilemma. Trump himself admitted that he was watching Apply, acknowledging that the message was meant for him. Apply, and while he tried to downplay the significance by insisting he was not concerned, his later complaints that China was erasing America's role in World War II revealed the sensitivity. Apply. At its core, the parade was not simply about military muscle. It was about who gets to write history and who will define the future global order. Apply. Analysts argue that Beijing's display is part of a long-term strategy to normalize its role as an equal superpower, to erode the moral authority of the United States, Apply, and to position China as the champion of a multipolar world. Whether in Asia, Africa, or Latin America, such imagery resonates. Apply, particularly with nations that have felt marginalized by Western dominance. And for Trump, who has made America first the mantra of his presidency, Apply. The risk is that these parades are not just performances, they are markers of real strategic change. Apply. Donald Trump's tariff policy has been one of the most defining and controversial aspects of his economic vision, branded under the America First banner. Apply. These measures were introduced with the promise of reviving American manufacturing, shielding domestic industries from what he has long called unfair trade practices. Apply, and generating new revenue for the federal government. But while the short-term appeal of protecting American jobs resonates with many of his supporters, Apply, the ripple effects of these tariffs are now reshaping global economic relationships in ways that may undermine U.S. influence over the long run. Apply. The tariffs on Chinese goods in particular have been central to this strategy. Trump has repeatedly argued that Beijing has taken advantage of Washington for decades. Apply. Flooding American markets with cheaper products, stealing intellectual property, and manipulating its currency to give its exporters an unfair edge. Apply. By imposing steep tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese imports, Trump hoped to force China into concessions, level the playing field, and demonstrate American resolve. Apply. Yet the results have been mixed. While certain industries within the United States have benefited temporarily from the protectionist shield, Apply, consumers and small businesses have borne the brunt of higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and retaliatory measures from Beijing. The global consequences have been just as profound. Apply. In Beijing, instead of capitulating, leaders have sought new trade partnerships across Asia, Africa, and Europe, accelerating efforts to reduce reliance on the American market. Apply. At the same time, India and Russia, both hit by secondary effects of U.S. tariffs and sanctions, have inched closer to China. Apply, finding common cause in their opposition to what they see as American economic bullying. The summit in Tianjin, where Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Apply, and Narendra Modi appeared together, was emblematic of this trend. Leaders of three major powers, once wary of each other, Apply, now finding new incentives to coordinate as Washington tightens its grip on trade. For allies, the policy has been equally unsettling. Countries like Japan, South Korea, Apply, and the Philippines have long depended on American security guarantees, but they also rely heavily on global trade networks that have been destabilized by Trump's tariff wars. Apply. The uncertainty has left many of them hedging their bets, strengthening economic ties with China even as they continue to host U.S. military forces. Apply. This dual approach underscores the dilemma Trump's policies have created. His tariffs may protect certain American industries in the short term, Apply, but they also weaken the confidence of partners who see Washington as less reliable in the rules-based system it once championed. Domestically, Apply. The tariffs have faced legal challenges as well. A federal appeals court has already struck down several of Trump's measures, Apply, ruling that they overstep presidential authority under existing trade law. Trump has vowed to fight the case at the Supreme Court, Apply, but the possibility that his flagship economic tool could be dismantled in court raises questions about the sustainability of the entire policy. Apply. And while the America First narrative carries political strength, Apply. The practical costs from fractured alliances to potential judicial defeat suggest that the strategy could carry more risks than rewards. The gathering of Xi Jinping, apply. Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi at the economic summit in Tianjin was not just another diplomatic photo opportunity. It marked a subtle but important shift in the global landscape. Apply. One that illustrates how Donald Trump's tariff wars and protectionist policies are driving former rivals into closer cooperation. For decades, apply. China and India have shared a relationship riddled with mistrust, shaped by a bitter border war in the 1960s and continued skirmishes along the Himalayas. Russia, apply. Once New Delhi's closest defense partner, has watched uneasily as India expanded ties with Washington in recent years. Yet now, in the shadow of America's trade restrictions, apply. These three powers are finding reasons to close ranks, and the implications for U.S. influence are significant. For Beijing, the incentive is clear. Apply. Trump's tariffs and rhetoric have cast China as the central adversary in America's economic narrative. Apply. That pressure has encouraged Xi to accelerate outreach to nations that share grievances against Washington. By embracing both Moscow and New Delhi, apply. China projects an image of leadership in a multipolar world, a counterweight to Western alliances. For Russia, apply. Isolated by Western sanctions since the annexation of Crimea and further marginalized by its war in Ukraine, partnering with China has provided economic lifelines and diplomatic cover. Apply. And for India, which has historically balanced between great powers, Trump's tariffs on steel, aluminum, apply, and other exports served as a sharp reminder that Washington's friendship is transactional, vulnerable to sudden shifts in political mood. Apply. The result is an emerging triangle of cooperation that poses challenges for the United States. At its core, this alignment suggests that economic self-interest may overcome old rivalries. Apply. China and India remain competitors in Asia. Apply. But their willingness to engage in high-level summits signals recognition that they share common ground when it comes to resisting what they perceive as American overreach. Russia, apply. With its vast energy resources and arms trade, provides the glue that binds them. Apply. Offering incentives for both nations to tolerate differences in order to secure economic and strategic benefits. For Washington, the danger lies in the symbolism as much as the substance. Apply. The image of Xi, Putin, and Modi standing together sends a message to the world that U.S. pressure is pushing key players toward alternative partnerships. Smaller nations, apply. From Southeast Asia to Africa, take note of this unity. Apply. Weighing whether aligning with America's shifting trade policies is less reliable than fostering ties with a bloc that positions itself as more consistent and less judgmental. Apply. The long-term risk is that the United States could find itself isolated at the very moment it seeks to strengthen its dominance. Apply. Trump's strategy of using tariffs as leverage may have short-term tactical appeal, but it also accelerates the creation of parallel systems of trade and diplomacy. If Beijing, Moscow, apply, and New Delhi continue to build bridges, apply, they could form the nucleus of an alternative order, one in which America's ability to dictate the rules of commerce and geopolitics is sharply diminished. Apply. Donald Trump's trade policy has always carried a sense of boldness, but it is also fraught with vulnerabilities that could prove costly in the long run. Apply. The tariffs that he has touted as a weapon of national revival now stand on unstable legal ground. Apply. A federal appeals court has already ruled that several of his measures rested on a faulty interpretation of trade law. Apply. Questioning whether the president has the authority to unilaterally reshape the economic playing field, Trump has vowed to take the case to the Supreme Court. Apply. Confident that its conservative majority will side with him. Apply. Yet even sympathetic justices have often resisted attempts by presidents to expand executive power without congressional approval. If the court strikes down his approach, apply, the very foundation of his trade strategy could collapse, leaving behind fractured alliances and strained markets with little to show for the fight. Apply. The diplomatic consequences are equally pressing. Trump has presented tariffs as a tool for restoring fairness, but allies increasingly view them as instruments of coercion. Traditional partners like Japan, South Korea, apply, and the European Union see Washington's actions less as protective measures and more as unilateral dictates that disregard the cooperative spirit of the international order the United States once built. Apply. This erosion of trust risks weakening America's ability to marshal coalitions, whether in matters of trade, security, or global crises. The more Washington insists on acting alone, apply, the greater the incentive for other nations to band together in search of alternatives, and many of those alternatives now point toward Beijing's orbit. Economically, apply, the long-term dangers lie in the unintended consequences of protectionism. While tariffs can shield specific industries for a time, they also raise costs for consumers. Apply, disrupt supply chains and invite retaliation. Farmers, manufacturers, apply, and small businesses across the United States have already felt the strain of higher input prices and shrinking export markets. If these pressures persist, apply, the political support that gave Trump room to pursue his aggressive trade stance may begin to erode, turning his signature policy into a liability. Apply. There is also the risk of miscalculation. By framing trade as a zero-sum contest, Trump has heightened tensions with adversaries and allies alike, narrowing the space for compromise. Apply. China's military parade and its growing partnerships with Russia and India illustrate how these policies can drive geopolitical shifts that run counter to American interests. Apply. What Trump presents as leverage may over time function as isolation, leaving the United States outside of emerging networks of cooperation. In the end, apply. The gamble of Trump's approach lies in its imbalance of risk and reward. The promise of a second American golden age rests on a strategy that is vulnerable in courts, apply. Costly in markets, and alienating in diplomacy. If the legal challenges succeed and alliances continue to fray, apply. Trump's high-stakes trade war may be remembered not as the catalyst of American resurgence, but as the moment the global order tilted more decisively toward China.